Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Kramer. Our guest today is Ryan Niddel. Let's talk about business, metaphysics. Let's talk about success from the inside out. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thanks for having me, Alicia. I'm really excited to be here, especially from how our conversation just started. This is incredible. I don't get to speak like this very often.
New besties, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
Kindred spirits. Although I will say, you've got a pretty impressive track record for success that I think we need to start with, because we have an audience of entrepreneurs, like I mentioned to you, all over the map. Everyone from startup phase to solopreneur to small to medium-sized business owner who really built their business from nothing into a multi-million-dollar empire. But there is a driving force within every single person listening. I'm sure you can relate personally, as well as all the people that you've previously consulted with, worked with, hang out with, right? There is an inner drive, an inner desire for creating something bigger than ourselves. There's also a lot of bumps and hurdles and bruises and a lot of shit we have to work through in the process. You've accomplished a fair amount of success, and I'm sure you've had a fair amount of your own bumps and bruises. Can you give us the highlight reel, if you will, of what you've got going on today and what it took to get there?
Absolutely, Alicia. And I think one of the things you just stated was so profound to me, and that's that inherent nature of creation that's inside of all of us, right? And as we're having our conversation, the times in which I've gotten the biggest bumps, right, where I've got the most black eyes, were the time where I wasn't in that energy of creation. I didn't have more of that love, more of that focus, more of that, I'll call it that harmonic balance between, spirit and source versus the physical plane. And excited to backtrack into that, because as you're listening to our conversation and you're feeling called and compelled to create, that's our natural state. Like, that is, to me, how we all show up in the world. And so my current methodology of creation, my current vehicle is a company called MIT45. And it's a supplement company, for lack of a better term. We import, we manufacture, we distribute a leaf called kratom, and it's in this unique emerging wellness space, right? It's got equal parts good and equal parts not so good about it if you look online. But from 2019 until now, I came on board as a consultant in 19, and we did about $5 million a year in revenue. We had about 20 employees, really good business, right? We were profitable, which to me is good for a $5 million a year business and a consumable good. And gosh, I look at last year, we ended up just under 70 million in revenue. We have about 80 full-time employees, and we're trending for things keep going on the right path, a little bit north of 100 million this year. And it's to say, gosh, what an impactful way to share these gifts from that, again, that energy of creation, of creating new products now, creating new customers, creating new verticals. It's like when the energy of our business gets stuck, not only do we simplify, right? Because I think human beings, at least myself, I overcomplicate almost everything, right? Creation and making money is inherently way easier than, I think it's the easiest thing in the world if I want it to be the easiest thing in the world. And so I look to simplify the stories I'm telling myself, the stories that my coworkers are telling themselves, the stories we're collectively saying about the business. Then we switch into the power of creation, creating a new product, a new vertical, a new market. We can kind of backtrack. I grew and sold a CBD company from 2016 to 2018. I grew a custom clothing company for a couple of years prior to that. But then there's this big black eye that I received, that I gave myself, right? The way I view the world now, nobody gave it to me, where I started a merchant processing company, processing credit card payments online. And I had a big ego, wasn't checking with myself. I wasn't connected to anything on a more, multidimensional plane, if you will. It was me. It was the power of I, if you will. And I had just came on the backside of selling a web hosting company to GoDaddy. Thought I had the Midas touch at 29. And by 31, I was flat broke. When I say flat broke, like truck repossessed, 2 rental properties in foreclosure, not like a little broke, not like I can't afford the fuel on my private jet. Like everything is evaporating from underneath me. And it's been fascinating, Alicia, because the way I view the world now versus back then, it's like I was so bogged down in that story of the hero's journey. Like I almost had to have something to overcome so I could be a phoenix and rise from the ashes versus look, I don't have to experience pain and frustration and strife the way I view the world now. Like that's a conscious, well, really unconscious choice, and to be able to rewire those conversations. And certainly, don't get me wrong, there's still a level of energy and effort that gets put into things. It's not all snap your fingers and magically there's, piles of cash in front of us and all the things we might want. But it's such a different way to view the world now versus back then, where it was just ego back then. And man, if I could go back in time and share with that version, I was essentially a solopreneur, right? I had a staff of maybe 8 or 10 people that supported me. I didn't even treat them as equals, right? They were, I'll begrudgingly call them worker bees, just for frame of reference, versus treating them as equals, versus really valuing the energy that they brought to the table and looking at all the things we could have done differently. But it bears to a sense of logic as to why that business didn't work out for me.
You can see it now so clearly in retrospect, especially given your own sort of personal spiritual evolution. A lot of people are in that and they don't know, just like you didn't know at the time. Now, luckily, most people who are listening to this, with the exception of maybe some new listeners who are tuning in and kind of getting a feel and haven't gotten, the weird vibe yet and taken a hike, but for those who have been around for a while and they know and love this more metaphysical conversation, they're open, right? They're open to the even the concept that the things that are wrong in their life, in their business, has something to do with them, and there is something they can do to change it. Now, you mentioned something that was so profound. Actually, you mentioned a lot of things that were profound, so we've got to give credit where credit is due, right? But there was that shift that you made. It was a belief that you shifted. The belief that business has to be hard is so highly reinforced. There is all of this, and I grew up on a dairy farm in central Wisconsin. So work ethics literally were a virtue. They were rewarded with praise, even though everyone was miserable, burnt out, unhappy, depressed, alcoholics, it was really ugly. But you're a hard worker, as though somehow that is better than being a good mother, a good father, having plenty of money, having plenty of love and happiness. Oh, but you're a hard worker. And so many of us in our culture, but especially as entrepreneurs, have this belief that we have to really earn it. We have to work hard. We have to grind away. It's counterintuitive, right? When you're taught that, and then you're looking at your results and you're like, what the fuck is going on? I'm putting in 12 or 14 or 16-hour days, doing all the stuff that everybody says to do. And yet, am I really better off than I was before?
Mm-hmm.
And then you mentioned you had this shift, this mindset shift, that it didn't have to be that way. It could be different. Now, absolutely. Some people are probably listening and they're like, I wouldn't believe that if it came out of anybody else's mouth, but you did just say that you're on pace for over $100 million this year. So maybe I'll give this guy a little bit of an open mind.
And I think, Alicia, that would be that all that I would ask is just to consider the possibility, right? It's just, as you're tuning into our conversation, it's whose thoughts are you thinking, right? Whose program are you running right now? Because if I go back in my history, much like yours, it sounds like I've born and bred in Ohio, right? Just north of Columbus. Father used to climb telephone poles, and he'd worked his way through hard work all the way up through an organization to become a vice president. And it was a badge of honor of working more hours, working harder, more, but not from a consumption, from the effort that it was being put in. And that was what I was taught, right? It's hard work, right? You work hard, you work long, you outwork everybody else, you're going to have more. And I believe that to be true. And I can say at different points in my life that might have served me. But then I go through that recalibration phase, as I call it now, when I hit rock bottom. And I can also throw in there, was caught being unfaithful to who was my girlfriend at that point. Fortunately, we figured out what was some turmoil inside of me, and she's not my wife. So, right, things are good that way. It's a long time ago for me, 9 years. But as we look at it, it really took me, Alicia, another 6 years to fully unwind those stories, right? I believe now change happens in an instant, right? As soon as I snap my fingers, change is here. But I didn't have those skills during that time. And I was still working hard. I was still, digging myself out of the financial hole. And it was, I have to outwork everybody. That's the only way out. And then I started getting introduced to things like metaphysics, right? The University of Sedona, and just a different way of thinking. Started getting introduced to some of the teachings of someone like a Jim Rohn, and kind of where his sense of awareness got brought in for me. Then started, being exposed to psychological constructs like something called spiral dynamics, which is so fascinating to me as it pertains to the change that I really went through. And what I mean by that is, most of us, I'll just speak for myself, I won't use generalities. I used to want to change my behaviors. And behavior is this base level thing. It's, am I getting up on time? Am I eating the right foods? Those are behavioral aspects to me. But behaviors are supported to me by beliefs. And so beliefs, right? I might go talk to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and maybe they'll help work through some early childhood trauma that created a belief. And that was impactful for me. I spent some time there. I'm by no means disparaging that at all. But then there's a level above that, which ends up being the values that we have. And if you can get in and consider those values, like hard work being a virtue, right? That is a value that has been instilled for whatever the reason. And seeing, okay, everything downstream from that then alters if I can kind of root around and figure out how to change that value proposition. And then saying, gosh, for myself, you have a spiritual component of ourselves, you have a relationship, you have making money, you have your relationship with the body, maybe the relationship with the world around you. And each one of those 5, 6, 7 aspects of the human experience all have their own internal value chains inside of them. And it started to dawn on me that when I'm stressed, when there's those moments of uncertainty, I'm really reverting back to the lowest level across those boards. It's like, that's my default operating system. And say, holy cow, could it really be this simple? Right? Because to me, it's like, laughingly, I refer to it as when, if you've seen the movie The Matrix before, when Neo first saw the Matrix, right? He saw the ones and zeros. And like, holy cow, it's just that simple. I can just move some things around and I can install new values or new beliefs or new behaviors. And it literally is just that simple. It can happen in minutes versus in months or days or years. And the first time I heard that, I thought it was so, so far out there, right? So woo-woo. So no chance it works that way. And I just started questioning, well, what if it is that simple? What if we're made, no matter what someone's religious beliefs are, made in the image of something greater than ourselves, potentially. And that ultimate power, that all being, all knowing, all seeing, that is inside of me as well. I should probably tap into that. I should probably own that part of me as well. I should probably live through that and feel that and honor that part of me instead of pushing it down. And during those times, Alicia, I struggle to reconcile with the ego. I call it the big E versus the little E. I've got that big E on my shoulder that's like that, I'm the best and I want to pound my drum and everybody look at me. There's the little E, that's that part that's inside of you that's like that knowing, that certainty. And to me, that little E, the ego that's inside, that gives us that internal self-confidence, that internal belief. Man, when I can ratchet that version of myself up and hold that power of intention and realize how powerful that I am, success comes really, really quickly. Logically, to go from 5 million to 100 million in 3 years, it's feasible, but I haven't thrown in the best part yet. Up until 6-7 months ago, we haven't been able to sell our product online. So how everybody makes money with e-commerce and, you run ads and, it's just spending more money. uh, it's a lot more than that, right? It's taken us a lot more than that. And we also have a really healthy profit margin, right? That's the other thing I think as business owners, everybody wants to talk about laughing at their 2 comma club or how much revenue they're transacting. But I've tried to spend revenue before. It doesn't really work that well. You got to spend the profit that's left over. We run a fairly profitable business as well. So I don't know all that word vomit, what came out of that, but it just dawned on me. All these things are really, really simple.
It is. I always say, once you understand how the mind works and you understand how the universe works, well, now all the other stuff just becomes superstitious. And we can challenge all of those beliefs. I've been saying for years, you look at what you're telling yourself, you look at the story, you look at whatever that tripping point is and challenge it. If it is not a law of the universe, then it is just a belief. If it does not apply to everyone, everywhere, without exception, then it is not a law. And really, laws are the only things that cannot be changed. Our perception can change. Our vibrational point of attraction can change. Our beliefs, our motivations, our behaviors, all of that can change. Shit, our personality can change. A lot of things can change. Laws cannot be changed. But if something that you're believing, that you're doing, that you're living over and over and over again doesn't feel good, there's a reason it doesn't feel good. And we need to simplify it, like you were saying, because when we overcomplicate it, we don't do anything at all that makes any positive difference. Like, if you think something's hard, you're going to prove to yourself how hard it is. And all the stuff, doesn't matter how many pills or potions or coaches or gurus or whatever, right? It's not going to make any difference until we're able to bring it back to the basics, to simplify it. I love what you're talking about with respect to finding that. I refer to it as the divine within us. You refer to it as, the little e. Mm-hmm. Now, the big E serves a purpose. We've been given it for a reason, for sure. And it's so interesting because so many of the things that you said completely parallel a conversation that I had with a client just this morning. It's the old model and it's not working. It never did work all that well. A lot of people just sort of accepted it, just like all the other stupid bullshit beliefs that we've all been accepting. And if we're honest with ourselves, it doesn't feel good. There's got to be a better approach. We all know that when you're in love with what you're doing, doesn't matter if it's your business, if it's a hobby, if you love working out, if it's your family, your wife, your kids, husband, whatever, right? It feels good. It feels open. It feels expansive. You feel more like yourself when you're doing it. And so many people through this process of overcomplicating, like, I got to do all this stuff in my business that I don't like. Got to do all this stuff that I don't like, as though somehow they're going to have this happy life, this happily ever after, pushing through all of this resistance and all of these old constructs. It doesn't have to be that way. There is no law of the universe that says success has to feel horrible. It has to be really hard. It has to feel like torture. And I think that this kind of evolution, as more humans are becoming aware of the law of attraction and metaphysical concepts and spirituality, and sort of kind of evolving from some of the older models of the religious approach, which are not bad. They're just a little bit, I would say, they're not as high vibrational. They're not as empowering. And people are starting to wake up and they're recognizing, wait a second, what if it can't be different?
Yes. And I love all that, Alicia, because from where I sit, right, I keep referring to that spiral dynamic based construct where, right, and I'd encourage you to not worry about the levels from a numeric standpoint, but there's just imagine this ascension, if you will, from number 1 to number 9, 10, 11. It never stops. There's never a maximum actualization that exists. If you look at a level 3 type of individual and they find tremendous peace in a tribe, they're probably part of a church. They're probably part of that old way of thinking. And that's a beautiful part, because I think so many of us have, even if it's not the legalistic Christianity type of world, there was a time in life where we were, we identified from a sports team, or in high school, I am insert your mascot. Like you had a tribe, you had part of that was a necessity for your definition of self. But then you get up to a level 6 and all that dissolves. And all of a sudden it's like, holy cow, there's an entire world that I belong to and belong in and belong of. And so looking at those things versus, not even in versus, probably just in conjunction with the work of like David Hawkins, and being able to truly start to measure from a PhD side, right, from a physics side, of the energetic expression of turning particles into waves. And what does that, like, it's not woo-woo, it's scientifically proven, right? Mechanical engineering was my field of study, so I couldn't help for a period of time to say, well, hold on, this feels really, really far out there, but I'm really curious about it. Can I find a way to turn it into scientific based logic, right? Because it's the metaphysical, the world, certainly there's a lot of science that supports it, but it's perhaps a little in between. And seeing all these things and being able to put a level of rationalization to things that do break those old constructs. And even the conversation around, I call it that binary plane, everything is yes or no. Well, in the quantum field, you have yes and no, or you have no and yes, or you have yes and yes, or you have no and no. It's like all possibilities exist at all moments and all times. So if you're focused on that zero-sum total game of I have to win and you have to lose, you're breaking one of those, I'll call it, almost the way I look at it, I call it a universal law. Like, everything is not a zero-sum total game. It's the opposite. The universe is endless and expansive, and there's possibilities outside the scope of our reality. So that should be the driving force. That should be the magnet that's pulling us towards it, versus this pushback of, oh no, I have to be right, which means Alicia has to be wrong. And so that's the way this is. Everything started to shift for me when I'm like, no. And I need to sit with what Alicia just shared, because it hits me in such a way. I don't know if I like it. That's probably something inside of me. What don't I like about myself? What is she saying that reminds me of a version of me? Holy cow, we're all just mirrors of each other. Oh, it's all just one thing. Boy, it was like this master key unlock when I started running it through that process of the things that bother me with other people are just a direct reflection of something that bothers me about myself. How can I sit with that? It was a massive force multiplier for my success inside of business, inside of relationships. I still get bothered. I'm still a human being. It's not like I'm not, sitting here legs crossed, humming all day long and money's flowing from the sky. But it's the sense of awareness to say, well, why does that bother me? And what's it showing me about myself? And boy, that's been a really big difference from the version that got the black eyes versus the version that I could show up as now.
I think throughout time, really, but even in the past, I don't know, since around the time that Napoleon Hill came out with a lot of his work and started to introduce en masse the world to these different concepts, and taking personal responsibility can be understood just like every other principle, right, at different levels. And so for some people, taking responsibility at the very most rudimentary level is sort of just owning up to their mistakes, their imperfections, their humanness. But now what you just expressed so beautifully is taking that same exact principle of taking personal responsibility at a much higher level spiritually, where we begin to recognize, and this may be a little bit over some people's heads, but that's okay. We've all been there, and there's exponentially that much further we can all go in our understanding of this principle. But we are essentially the the primary creator of our own life. And this really trips people up because they're like, well, what about that guy and that thing that that person did or did not do? And it's like, okay, well, yes, we're all co-creating, but we're all one. And now we start to get into sort of this balance between understanding this matrix, if you will, and living within it. And there's a little bit of an acclimation process, because once you see what's really going on, it's a bit of a mind fuck for a tiny bit until you learn that, okay, no, I'm here for a reason, physical for a reason, doing the physical human life stuff for a reason. But now I have this greater awareness. So how do I want to make this life count? What do I want to do with this experience? What do I want to do with this opportunity? Now the game changes. It's no longer just about survival and understanding these concepts because I want to be more successful in my business, or I want more money, or I want to have more, harmony with my wife or husband or whatever. Now it becomes a different game. Now everything that you do takes on a slightly different meaning, and you're still living, you're still doing the stuff, you're still going to the soccer games, you're still taking a shower and wiping your ass and whatever it is that you've got to do. But there are those moments that are a little bit more enlightened, a little more spiritual, a little more connected, a little more tuned in to something. And it's not this superficial existence anymore. And I think that for a lot of people listening, their business in a lot of respects it's a passion project. It's a labor of love. It's a divine inner calling. Doesn't matter what you're selling. Doesn't matter what the product is, as long as you feel like your integrity with yourself. But the journey and the way that it affects other people, whether it's your employees, your own family, your own personal evolution, the way that it affects your clients or your customers, it becomes a much more elevated experience than just putting dollars in the bank account.
Yes. Yes, it does. I mean, and from how I view some of what you just shared, right? There's this dichotomy between responsibility and martyrship, right? Where oh, it's my fault, everything's my fault. And that's a really different energy. That's a really different come from than what can I learn about myself from this experience? And it was one of those things I had to go through where there was a point where it was martyrdom for me. It was like, oh, I'm just no good. I just can't do this because I failed before. And there were these stories that kept surrounding me that really I chose to wear as a badge of honor, right? It's like the scarlet letter. I had to have that A on my chest, like it mattered to somebody else in the world. And it really doesn't. That's just a reprogramming of to me, the relationship between the conscious and the unconscious mind, and the ability that we have to create. And then you said something that's near and dear to me, and that's very conscious of the words that I choose. And I do that because I believe that if I keep speaking of things that I want, that then has to inherently imply that I don't have it. It would be a lack of the thing that I want. And it's not good nor bad. I don't know that those two words even really need to exist. It's just my state of awareness in this moment of saying, okay, well, how would I phrase something like I want more money? I want a vacation. Okay, all those things are great, but can I go through an experience that it was shared with me is called timeline therapy. Can I leave my body for a second? Can I kind of transcend out, look and see that I'm here, and go to a point in the future where I have the thing that I say that I am in pursuit of? If I can, right, we can look at Joe Dispenza and, holding on to a memory of the future, or any type of terminology you'd possibly want to use. But all of a sudden now, I don't have to think of the sense of want. It's not an opposing force. I've already experienced it. Now I don't want it. Now I know that I have it. I gotta take the action. I gotta take those steps to get there. But to me, that future version of myself is going to guide me in that direction. That ends up being that internal voice, that little tap on the shoulder of, you should sell this, you shouldn't sell this, you should go left or go right. It's almost to me, as we talk about speeding up versus slowing down. I mean, imagine, for instance, you and I are driving along in a car together, and all of a sudden we see the flashing lights of a police officer behind us. Instead of slowing down to recalibrate, We decide to drop it down a couple gears and floor it. It's probably not going to be that good of an experience for us. But yet inside of business, I used to just keep flooring it, right? It's just more, go, harder, harder, harder. And you can go really far in the wrong direction if you're not aware of it. Versus stopping, simplifying things, going to visit a future version of myself, asking those questions. Because again, I believe that, that version of God or whatever it is inside of all of us, which is all knowing, all being, everything that's ever has been and everything that ever can be, it's an internal state of knowing right now. And it's being able to listen to that, which is then the challenge. It's like, hold on, this is so woo. How do I just go visit myself at this point in the future? How do I know I can trust that? Which is a whole nother conversation, right?
Oh yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one. We can know all the principles. And that's a different conversation I had with a different client this morning. Synchronicities. That really is our work. Because no matter how much someone professes to believe or to have faith in that divine, in that God force, when the mind starts to kick in, it can be really convincing. Really convincing. And once we get hooked into that fear, we're not thinking from the end. We're not thinking from that part of us, that higher self, that inner guidance that says, pick up the phone, make that phone call, don't do that, go this way instead. We're not anywhere in range of that clear guidance. When you're talking about the timeline method, which is an amazing technique, NLPers everywhere doing it, right? In hypnotherapy, we kind of, do basically a similar version of it. Neville Goddard is so good at teaching that principle of visualizing yourself in that end goal. See it through your eyes as though it's done. It's a done deal. Look at the evidence. How are you feeling? Kind of, it's the same principle. And that has such an interesting effect on the subconscious mind. You hear all the experts talking about, how the mind cannot differentiate between what you're imagining and what you're actually experiencing. And notice how what you've experienced impresses upon the mind and affects you. And so when you're conditioning your mind to be that version of yourself that has the thing that you want, it starts to become more normalized in the mind. And there's less tendency for the mind to do that crazy freak out, pushback, temper tantrum type of thing. But it does still happen, especially when you're reaching for something completely new and unknown. And that's, when you talked about, that, I don't remember exactly how you phrase it, but it was something to the effect of, shifting energy, releasing negative emotions, which is something that one of the very first things that I teach any of my clients, any of my customers, got to learn how to release negative emotion. That's energy. It gets stuck. Once you're hooked on whatever that negative thing is, you cannot get yourself into a sustainable, improved mindset. You are not in the right mental, emotional, vibrational state for coming up with solutions, or even just being a better version of yourself, not walking around like a asshole. You have to learn sometimes little techniques and processes just to navigate those little bumps on our journey, because even when all of these higher spiritual concepts, we still have all of that old conditioning in the mind that's getting triggered. We're bumping up against other people, are mirroring back to us to show us what we still need to work on. And those things become an essential part of our journey, just in sort of coping through the bumps. And so we don't fall down and, I can't get back up for a while. I have a feeling you've got some. I'd love to find out if you've got maybe a tip or a favorite technique or something that you can share with our audience when they're bumping up against the doubt, when they're bumping up against the fear, when they're wrestling with that internal critic?
Absolutely. It's incredible. It's like you're in my mind right now. It's beautiful. So I have something I would absolutely love to share that it's had a profound effect on me. And if you're open to the possibility, I would hope it to do the same for you. Where, as we talk about that future version, right, that whether it's timeline therapy or hypnotherapy, or you can just see it in your mind, however you get there, that there's a sense of something you're probably in pursuit of right now. And whether you have to close your eyes or not, I'm going to suggest you close your eyes and see it for yourself. Sense the senses that you can bring into your awareness. And from that place, once you go through that, I would ask you, is it in color or is it in black and white? Is it a large image or is it a small image? Can you hear sounds or is it quiet? And just take note of that. There's no judgment. There's nothing right or wrong here. Just you have a mental representation in your mind right now of a future state. And I ask you to come back and, right, eyes wide open, be completely present right now. And then if I ask you something that you know to be true right now, and you would close your eyes and say, just something that you know, probably your house. When you close your eyes, is it black and white? Is it color? Can you hear it? How large is that image? There's a pretty good probability they're different sizes. They're different color representations. They're different. And if you can take the part that you don't yet believe you know, which is probably the future state, and you can alter that image to have it look, feel, sound, be in the same scope and relativity to something you know, you are starting to alter that unconscious fiber of what the belief system is starting to adhere to, because it's matching something that you know to be certain. Then I take it a step further and I actually see, when I close my eyes, the things that I want in the future, for whatever the reason, most time they're over and to the right for me. And it is for me. And the things that I believe I know right now are almost always pretty much straight in front of me. But if I can close my eyes and I can alter that image and have it look like the present day, and then I take my magic pointing finger and I pull it across and bring that image and put it in the place of the thing that I know, there's this sense of euphoria. There's this vibration I feel. There's this energetic expression that I can't fully explain, verbally. It's the best feeling in the world for me. So when there's times that I'm butting up against that wall, and whether it's a real wall or a fake wall or a ceiling, whatever we want to call it, if I can just stop for a second, take a couple deep breaths, think about what I'm shooting for in the future, what am I aiming towards, alter that image to make it look like something I know I'm experiencing right now, and physically move those images to the same location in my mind, it's like the light bulb turns on. It's like there's such an energy. And then through that, very, very rapidly, because again, I believe that change happens in an instant. Why would anything be other than easy, effortless, enjoyable, fun, and quick? Because that's just the way that I want to code my life. Those things start to come into fruition very, very rapidly. That next either breadcrumb or the door that has to swing open, or the phone call or the email, or the sign on the side of the road that I've passed 100 times I've never noticed before that gives me the brilliant idea. It's a combination of that and disassociating from the how, right? That used to be my fixed belief was, well, I can see it, but how am I going to get there? I got to know the how. There's no plan in front of me, versus just completely being receptive to all that's in front of me and knowing that the clues are all there. I just have to take action on them.
You just dropped so much good information. I wish I could keep you, because there's so much more that we could talk about. We could go off on a tangent about the how. We could go off on so many different segues here. We could easily do probably a full-on lecture on this. That could be really powerful for everyone listening. But because we are out of time, I want to make sure I give you the opportunity to share with our listeners how they can connect with you, where you want to direct them to, any websites, social media, any place you want to point people.
Yeah, would be honored to. So, Alicia, any social media platform is just Ryan Niddel, right? RyanNiddel. That's all the major social media platforms. really just share stuff like we're talking about now, right? There's a level of business tactics and some of the things that are going on there. There's business strategy, and then there's metaphysics, and there's this, unique blend of all those together. Or on my website, which is just ryaniddel.com. Don't really have something I sell on there. It's more of just, if you want to keep up to date with what I'm doing and want to subscribe to a newsletter, by all means, you're more than welcome to.
Awesome. I want to thank you so much, Ryan. This has been super fun for me. I trust that all of our listeners enjoyed listening in and hearing your story. Amazing tips. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
And of course, got to thank all of our listeners. We're doing this for you. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you in the next episode.